And there's a fine line between high standards, striving to be better, wanting to do more, accepting I can do more, and then dropping over to actually nothing's ever good enough. I can't achieve.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Ricky.
We're talking thinking errors today, and this is the 9th in a series of 10 podcasts that we're running on this particular topic. And we all have these from time to time. They're perfectly normal. Most of the time we'll make mistakes in our thinking, but it's absolutely fine. I think they call them low-cost errors. But occasionally, these thinking errors can get in our way. They can cause us to be unsuccessful or even harm us. In today's podcast, we're talking about discounting the positives. So, Paul, today the question is, why do we overplay the negatives and ignore the positives?
Oh, that's a fascinating question. So discounting the positives as a thinking error is where literally you kind of go, anything good is not worth as good as anything bad. It's linked to a heuristic or a cognitive bias. So we are loss averse. We are negatively biased creatures. So again, we've talked about this in one of the other thinking error podcasts. But if you sort of go back in history, go back to previous generations, go back to your great grandparents. When we were living in little villages and scurrying in the woods, the ones that went, I'm not going to try that because it might kill me. I'm not going to eat that because it's trying to kill me. Chances are they were relations. And the ones that went, oh, that looks nice. Yeah.
The experimenters.
Yeah, they were food. So negativity is quite a useful trait in human beings in that it frames our world to be aware of risks. And being aware of risks is, if you know that's a risk, you can action it. If you blindly go through the world going, nothing's going to go wrong here, eventually you're going to get splattered. But what we're talking about here as a thinking error is where you take that to such a degree that actually when the positive is presented to you in a really obvious way, you rationalize against it. So there's one thing to say, I'm doing a big presentation to my boss's boss's boss, to go into that and come out and go, yeah, we've rehearsed it, I've had some feedback, I got a bit wrong, or remember to charge the clicker. That's quite healthy. There's another thing to come out of it and have everybody slapping you on the back, going, that was amazing, you really stormed it. And you to go, lucky. I won't be able to do it again. And that's what we mean by discounting the positive.
Right. And I recognise that occasionally I've done that because the one thing, when you use the presentation bit, it's really interesting because you do set your stall out to do the best job you can, and you might go, well, I missed something.
Yeah.
And the reality is the audience doesn't know because they don't know what you were going to say in the first place.
Yeah.
So you're over-egging something that just doesn't have any credence.
And so some of that is the mental filtering that we covered in another podcast where you're focusing on only the bad bits. But then some of this is then absolutely ignoring all of the evidence. And also beyond ignoring, going, I'm going to find a reason to tell you why the evidence that's presented to me that says I did okay is wrong. You got some feedback from the boss. Oh, they've just been on a training course. Your colleagues go, oh, thanks for that. Oh, this is being nice. They're a lovely person. They don't really mean it. They're just lovely. You're going out of your way here to
So why do we do that then?
Protective, partly. You go, actually, if you just assume everybody else is being nice to you, in a positive way, it's kind of driving you to try harder and you're not, because the sort of downside, like all of these, there's a downside to it. If we took all the lovely feedback, there is a risk that we start then becoming a bit complacent. And so if we're scared of becoming complacent, what's the thing we do? We downplay all the feedback. Because if we can interpret all the nice stuff as being you're not as good as you think you are, that might drive us to do a bit more, which in certain circumstances is quite useful. You see this with a lot of senior leaders who go, I'm not going to take, that I'm good enough. I always have to strive to be better. And there's a fine line between high standards, striving to be better, wanting to do more, accepting I can do more, and then dropping over to actually nothing's ever good enough. I can't achieve. So when you drop into that discount in the positive, where you're just ignoring all the good stuff, that's cognitively quite destructive, because you're going to wear yourself out eventually, because you're never going to give yourself a break. You're never going to rest. But also it probably means that you are constantly striving for 10 out of 10 when actually the situation needs you to do 7 out of 10 and move on. And therefore you're over-engineering everything, which probably means you're not doing a whole load of things further down the list you could be doing. So you're doing too much of the first 3 things on your list and not enough of the next 10.
Because we're trying to get it right, trying to get it perfect.
Yeah.
So I imagine, though, in that kind of context, there's also a way in which you could harness this. So if you're, say in sports, and you've performed to a certain level, you're used to, you're an accomplished player, let's say tennis or whatever it might be, but actually you lose a game, you could use it to go, actually, how do I just move on with this, because I can put it down to perhaps a lack of preparation, a lack of focus. So I'm using the negatives in order to springboard a learning opportunity out of this that goes, so yeah, I didn't do some of those things, and I recognise that. Actually, next time I will prepare better, I will train harder, I will do what I need to do.
Yeah, totally agree. And you come back to this argument. So one of the things that comes out of this particular thinking area is perfectionism. And you go, if you take perfectionism and having high standards as being slightly different things. So having high standards is a desire to do well. Perfectionism is I have to do well or I'm not good. Right? It's only one step up from one to the other. Right? So you take that in that scenario, the desire to really want to do well means I've come out of that game I've lost, and I'm going to go, I lost that game. I maybe need to go and work on my backhand, or I need to go and work on my serve, or I need to go and do a little bit more. Where you get into trouble is when you go to perfectionism and then go, but I'm not going to recognise that I played somebody who was far better than me, and I was never expected to win that game in the first place, and it's part of my growth. And that then becomes destructive, because you then start going, well, I can't win any of these games, and what's the point of practicing, and what's the... So you got this, do you get what I mean? There's a really fine line between these traits being helpful and unhelpful. In one of these podcasts, on this series, we'd have talked about this sort of idea of should and must statements, and it just gets used in sports analogy quite a lot. If I have to win this game, and the reality is I don't have to win this game. I want to win this game.
Yeah.
But I have to accept I'm not going to win all the games. And again, here is like you see this again. Classic sport. I'm probably saying this because I'm a Tottenham fan, but you saw this a lot last year, which is or this year, sorry, which is people are going, these are all the things that are wrong with this team. And you go, hang on, this team came from a really difficult place at the end of last season. Changed the number of players, changed the manager, learning a new style. And what you're telling me is none of the work they've done counts for anything. They're not on a journey. And you see pundits all the time. They're just going, I'm going to discount all the work they've done, all the great stuff, because they're not where they need to be. Well, that's a journey. If we don't acknowledge the steps, eventually we're going to lose momentum and energy.
And I think when you look at, football, I think the media play a really big part in the binary element of win one, you're great, lose one, you're terrible. There's no middle ground, allowing for growth, allowing for development, allowing for learning and all those things. What I like about the way most, because clearly athletes probably get caught in this trap too, is they have this concept of the personal best. So I can still do well, even though I might not win or even medal. The fact is, if I run my personal best in a final or a semi-final in an Olympics or a high-profile meet, let's say, then actually I'm taking that as a win because I've developed, I've grown, I've improved in some way. So using that personal best is, well, that's nobody else's, that's mine.
Yeah, and I think if you then play that back into a business concept, the one thing I think is very different in the world we deal with than our colleagues who deal with sports people is business is less scarce. The reality is, if you're you're Tom Daley, Olympic diver, you one shot every 4 years.
Yeah.
You have a bad day that day, over and done with.
And you may well have trained for 4 years for that moment.
Yeah. And
it might end in the first round of the event.
Yeah, and you might have a cold that day, right? Whereas in the business world, you go, it's a less scarce world. You might lose this deal. You might win 3 others.
Yeah.
You're more playing a numbers game. And so what we're talking about here with this kind of the positive is where you're not able to see that growth. You're not able to see the things that went well. You're not able to see the things that you're almost, it's almost the reverse from some of the other things. You're basically discounting anything that you do as good and prioritizing everything else in the world as great. And some of the other biases and thinking errors are the other way around, where you go, so we talked about personalization. It's all about me, where you're almost going here the opposite and going, it's nothing to do with me. And you go, well, actually the truth's somewhere in the middle. You get some of it right and you're growing and you're learning and some of that is about you and some of it's got nothing to do with you and the world is the world.
Well, what we trained when we go for interviews, we're trained to deliver your part in the process.
Yeah.
And you're actually challenged. You say, you use we then. And you go, I think it's unfair to go, what was your part in it? Because everything is a combination of factors and contributors that lead you to an outcome, successful or otherwise. And therefore, for somebody to claim all the credit when it goes well or absolve themselves of all the credit when it goes poorly because it's them, it's this, it's the weather, it's the situation.
But equally, you get a number of people who basically go, I know it went really well, but that was luck. That's not true either. And that's discounting the positive of going, you had a role in that. And I perfectly accept that you were part of a team and the team all performed on the day. But actually, if you were the leader of that team, you did a whole load of things that made that happen.
Yeah, you still prepared them, trained them.
Yeah.
Developed them, created opportunities.
Yeah. And yet at the same time, you were lucky that nobody had the flu that day and that the laptop that you picked didn't break. There was a whole load of things that went into that at the same time.
Well, don't they say in new business ventures, most of it that is down to timing as much as anything else. Timing has a massive bearing, that you hit the market just at the right time or you hit the market just at the wrong time.
Yeah. And so I think here what we're really talking about is to go, can you, and we see this a lot, can you accept praise? Can you accept feedback? So one of the things I think about a lot, and I did this, I had this with my coach many years ago, where if you gave me feedback and told me what I was doing wrong, I was fine with it. I could take that on board. I didn't like it. I'd get grumpy and upset and go and sulk in the corner, but I'd take it on board. I'd go and deal with it. And that was quite useful because it allowed me to grow quite a lot. But if you told me something nice, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. Just be like, that's all wrong. So my coach made me just go, you're going to get good feedback, positive feedback about things you do well, and all you're allowed to do is say thank you.
And I think that's good advice for everybody.
Yeah, but I found it really hard. But it's an interesting way of kind of going down and saying, actually, I've got to take on board that I'm not getting everything wrong. I'm part of this, and I've got to help find that balance. And the first part of finding balance for some of us, particularly if we got those imposter thoughts, is going, I may not know everything I know to be here, but that's not the same as going, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not a fraud, but I'm probably not the finished product either. And that's true for all of us.
I was going to say, who is? And I think I share some of that and I don't know whether it's a British trait where we're not good with these things, the stiff upper lip and all that stuff, if that even is a thing, by the way. But you go, when people give you feedback, we don't know how to deal with it. In fact, receiving feedback is as much a skill as being able to give feedback.
Yeah.
Because actually, you get a choice with feedback. It's a massive gift, but you get a choice. You get the choice to process that in a way that says, okay, what does that mean? What can I learn? How can I move forward with it? Or you can choose to ignore it. Or to this point, this podcast is you choose to discount it and look for all the reasons why that's not right.
And I would say the same rules apply with luck as well. Everybody gets a bit of luck. Everyone deserves a bit of luck. Everybody has to accept that they're lucky. And that's okay. But it wasn't all luck. And most of us actually make our own luck. And quite a lot of the time, our luck comes not from being in a lucky place, but for recognising we're in a lucky place and actioning it.
I might be quoting the wrong person here, but I think it was Arnold Palmer that was, the harder I practice, the luckier I seem to get.
Yeah.
And I might be wrong, and I'm sure others have paraphrased it since.
But I love that concept, which is luck is actually something we make and recognise. Again, I might be quoting the wrong person, but I think it's Leslie Joseph who said, sometimes I like to lean forward in the line and make sure luck notices I'm here, fate notices I'm here. And I like that idea as well. So it is that concept of going, how do I create some balance to here? Because if I am discounting the positive, if I'm taking everything that's good and putting a barrier between me and it to protect myself from it, eventually I'm telling myself, therefore I am not good and I am not worthy. And that's not going to create the mindset or the outcome you need to move forward. So when you see that, when you're pushing the evidence, pushing the good away, you have to start going, well, hang on a minute. What was my role in this? What was the good here? What's the evidence that actually I did something good here? When somebody says something nice, go, well, why can't I celebrate that? Why can't I just say thank you and smile and, take the gold medal for a second?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think, what does that project onto others when they give you what they genuinely believe is a positive message about how you've delivered, performed, or made something happen, and you kind of dismiss it? Does that encourage them to want to give you more feedback, or does it actually go, well, you don't really care, so why will I bother next time?
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say with that is also there's some personality differences here as well, because some people need external reference points to help them understand where they are. Some of us need that. We're externally orientated and some of us don't. Some of us take internal reference points. And therefore, when people get good feedback, for people who don't need it, we have to kind of recognise we might not need it per se to do the role, but it still has a role. It still has a bearing on us and our overall mindset. But I can think of a number of people I've coached who've used this phrase, I do not need to be thanked for doing my job. It's my job. They pay me for that bit. And you go, well, that's true. But actually, if you do a bit of it really well, why shouldn't you be thanked? Why shouldn't you be acknowledged? Why shouldn't you be rewarded? What is it that's so different about you that actually you can't stop and go, yeah, no, okay, I did okay there? What is it you're afraid of? And this comes back to your emotional state, that being successful or being seen to be successful is going to say about you that makes you feel uncomfortable. Because you have to acknowledge that. If you're massively discounting the positive, we don't do any of these things because we hate ourselves. We do it because we're protecting ourselves.
But what from?
Yeah, and fear of success is probably just as bad as fear of failure. So if I can't accept that I've done some good things, am I protecting myself from the feeling that I'm about to be found out as a fraud, some imposter thoughts? Am I being too perfectionist, going, I know you think that's good, but I should have done much better because I've got some other beliefs about? Or is it just as simple as going, if I accept all this, I might become complacent and not try hard enough. So I can't accept this because I can't stop.
Yeah, and people are driven, aren't they, in terms of, wanting to be better and do all those things, and that's great. I think one of the things thinking about this through a personal lens is when I think about that through my career, I realise how much, because I'm, in sales, it's always the same. You can have a good year, and they always say you're only as good as your last week, last month, last year. And therefore you have a good year and you think, oh, I've got to do it all again now. So the shine of that good performance isn't realised, and you go, I'm not enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
So when you do have these highs along the way and lows, and I think, you use the word balance. How do you create some balance in the middle? So we're looking at what can we learn, what can we repeat and do more of, and what might we want to modify or change or even stop in some cases. Because otherwise, if everything's destination-led, you never enjoy the ride. And the reality is we all live in a world that's changing, and what we thought was the destination is probably not. So
a couple of things there. You take that sort of growth mindset piece of kind of, reframe that feedback into, that was good. Thanks, because I did work hard. I accept some of that was luck, but I worked really hard. So I'm taking some of it. And the other is to always think about whether it was you, luck, the world, what actually happened, and was it what you wanted? Did you get closer to your outcome? And if the answer is yes, just accept it as yes.
Yeah, because
I go back to your football analogy, which is in 12 months' time, no one will care what happened in the third game of the season.
No, of course they won't.
They'll care where everybody ended at the end of the year.
Absolutely. But I also go, do we do this with other people? They're only good because, or they're not as good because.
Yeah.
So we start to project.
And we've got that again. A lot of these thinking errors are very highly related to cognitive biases. Two of my favourites, the halo and the horn effect.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier in another podcast, actually.
Where you go, I'm discounting all the things this person does well because they got that wrong.
Yeah. Or I'm overplaying how good they are because they got one thing right. So all of a sudden I believe everything they do turns to gold type thing.
Yeah. And so I think, whereas the sort of some of the other ones, you kind of go, you see are quite self-destructive in an active way. So that kind of mental filtering where people are just ignoring everything they don't like and ploughing on regardless can be quite destructive in one way. Discounting the positive, I always think, in some ways, this sort of almost quiet destructiveness in the corner. You get these people who just don't believe they can do anything right, don't see any of the good they've done. They just see the things they're getting wrong. And you watch their performance, their demeanour wilt slightly because they're just being so hard on themselves, and you just need to pull them out of it. And I think sometimes when the world gets really tough on us, it's really easy to focus on all the things that have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And I got this sort of routine I use with people to go, when you get to that point, just a weekly reflection, and I can't even remember where I found this, but I loved it, which was 3 things I'm grateful for this week. 3 people I need to thank. What's the next one? I can't remember the third one. The fourth one is 3 things I need to do next. 3 things I need to focus on. And the idea being, what I'm grateful for, just reminding yourself the world's not all bad.
Yeah.
People I like to thank, to remind you that you've got a big support network, that you're not on your own. What am I focused on? Just to go, actually, what's really important to me? And I like that kind of, it takes 10 minutes once a week to do that exercise. It makes a massive impact. And it stops you seeing this kind of, I can do no right, or everything's terrible. It just creates you've got to, sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you've got to step right back and see the whole context and the whole picture. Otherwise your thinking's going to come up with a micro answer that's probably wrong.
Well, we know the dangers of cognitive tunnelling. There's lots of examples in lots of the books about, airline disasters and things like that, where they get so focused on that one thing and actually it causes a disaster. So I think you're right. At some point you've got to step back. So if we were to summarise this in 3 practical tips, I know you've just given one there in terms of, and we'll put these tips in the description, by the way. But if we were to summarise 3 practical tips for people to be mindful of when thinking about, are they overplaying the negative element and ignoring the positives? In other words, discounting that positive.
Yeah.
What are the 3 things, Paul?
So I think if you're going to discount a positive, firstly go, what evidence do I have that says it really wasn't as good as I thought it was, or it wasn't me? So that's number 1. So number 2, when you get positive things thrown at you, reframe them in a much more grateful, you-centric way. I think that some of that growth mindset stuff. Think about the effort you put in,
What you learned.
Yeah. So even if you can't go, yeah, thanks for that, I am a genius. You can go, thanks for that. You recognise I'm working hard at this, or I've put a lot of effort in, or I've grown. So some of that reframing. And the third one is just become, really aware of your inner voice and your inner critic. That if your inner critic is shouting down all the positive things in your life, make it justify them. And I think it's, I can't remember who said this. It's Ethan Kross, I think, the psychologist Ethan Kross. Said, you're not the voice in your head. You're the person listening to the voice in your head. And you have every right to talk back to it.
Next time on The Question Is.
Labelling is this phrase, lazy thinking. It's lazy thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I've taken one event and I've labelled someone or myself. So am I a loser because I went for that job and I didn't get it? Does that mean I am a loser?
Yeah.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.